today. Today our topic is we are talking about kind of how can we deal with environmental issues that we care deeply about in ways that are level, open, leave us with how do we kind of handle sort of hope in the face of things that maybe bring us despair? How can we engage with these topics with our students in ways that don't leave everybody going like, well, this is just messed up. I think I'm going to go watch YouTube. So that's both how do we kind of hold these things ourselves and how can we do that for our students. We're also perhaps are going to be addressing how do we handle topics that have become political footballs. I think that we've got material here for a lot of really useful conversation. For me, the more that I nature journal, the more I become connected to the natural world around me, the more I care about the places on the planet and the people and the creatures that also inhabit it. And when things that are done that threaten that, I feel it viscerally. And for me personally, nature journaling has been my key, my primary tool to stay in the stewardship game. When I feel if I feel the pressure and the stress of thinking about an environmental crisis, being able to go out and kind of re-saturate myself in the beauty and the wonder of nature really motivates me to stay in there and continue to work to protect it and to network with other people. And so maybe what we could do is let's start just with, if we're not sort of paying attention to ourselves, it's going to be hard to kind of extend this to our students. Love to hear some thoughts and ideas about what you personally do to first take care of yourself and in the face of environmental crises or issues that you feel strongly about. The way that you can participate in the conversation is you can just use the raise hand button, and when that when we see that, we will allow you to unmute yourself. If you don't have that on your screen, you can also just turn your screen on and wave at us, and we'll know that you then want to have something to share. Is there anybody that initially would like to share thoughts, comments, or ideas with the group?
Linda has her hand up.
Oh, yes.
I don't know how to do the unmuting. I think Givea has to do that because she's better.
And now we have to figure out how to, for some reason, when you're spotlighted, I can't find your unmute button. So I'm going to unspotlight you, then I'll see you again, and now I can unmute you. I think that's the, there we go.
Okay, hi. Hi. The first thing is in our county, we've done some work where among the public sector, you know, the public employees were not allowed to even use the word climate change, period. That would be like grounds for bad things to happen. So it probably speaks to the fact that I'm really in a remote place that it's some people, it is very divided, as you know. Anyway, so that has been one like top of mind as far as how to approach my teaching and sharing my nature journaling. So that's that's first thing I need to say. The second thing is that the more I read and the more things I find out, I find it really overwhelming and sad and really difficult to get far enough out away from this planet to be able to be calm and have hope. So that is it's a constant struggle, because it seems like the more I know, it's not like it gets better. Anyway, but sometimes it does. Sometimes it does. I'm just saying that, in the day-to-day, it's just like, oh. And then the third thing is, when I find that I'm just simply doing something like my nature journaling practice, or my husband and I started this trash pickup stuff in the national forest, and we networked with some local, mostly gray hairs like me, because people, they have more time, but young people too show up. And then the National Park Service was donating stuff. And like our county, even as divided as it is, you find that certain things, that picking up trash, that's something everybody can agree, don't do that. So it turned out that we've been doing this for many months now. So like once or twice a month for almost every month in remote locations. And we're hauling away like big loads of stuff. But what I want to get around to saying is that taking that action after the day of that, I would feel so good. Just like when I'm going down to just do simple nature journaling with no agenda, I would feel so good. And so that would kind of clear out my cobwebs of whatever, dysfunction is a good word.
Yeah.
That would give me a kind of leg up and the imagination about how I might offer what I would like to do in the community. So anyway, so that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Linda, that is your suggestions there are really kind of deep and profound. How can we, we're talking about something, when I think about it in the abstract, we can feel paralyzed. And how can you get around that paralysis? And what you did is you took action. Yeah, right? That's right. You took action, and also you say that this is a group that is doing this. We are. We have a small band. My husband calls them. He calls it the Trash Mash Posse, and I have to send out a e-newsletter after I get off this call to our people about, we're not going to do it on, it's so snowy around here. There's no finding the trash today, this weekend. Yeah. So we will, postpone that one, but let our people know that we're still on it. And a local brewery, like a microbrew place, has offered, like, anybody who wants to come after, because it's mostly adults at this point, anybody who wants to come after, they're giving them a free beer. So it was just like, there was just these weird little things where people like were leaning into it and like, oh, come by. I mean, we weren't like, we were just doing what we were doing, and so we weren't really looking for allies, but we're pretty visible in this community, so people found us. So anyway. Yeah. No, I mean, so let's kind of unpack this, because in what you are doing, there are some really beautiful strategies there. So what I see you doing is you are taking action on something that you can sort of affect, and also when you do it, you can look back into that field, through that forest, and kind of go, that's clean, and here are these piles of trash bags. That's right. Right. And that's right. That's right. It feels so good. It's surprising how good it feels. Yeah. And so that when you're thinking about something that is global and is caused by systems that you are not personally in control of, we feel disempowered and disconnected. So what you're doing is you are taking deliberate action on things that both you can see the result and you have control over, and you're doing that in community. I think that's the other kind of critical piece of this, is that you're not just out there doing it alone,
That's
that
right.
you have, there's a group of people that are doing this, and you're starting to make connections between people. And it doesn't
That's
matter whether you wear a red hat or a blue hat. This is
Well,
something
that's
that where we can come together and connect. And I think that a lot of this, having people separated from each other gives people who want to, freely emit their carbon, that's the get out of jail free card. If we're all fighting each other instead of sort of finding
That's
commonality, working together. So you're building community and you're taking action on things that you can impact. You're doing that in nature, and that's building a relationship with nature. I think that those are all really essential stepping stones towards kind of the mindsets that we're going to need to dig ourselves out of this hole.
Well, the other thing that I find, because I felt before the pandemic, and I was listening to way too much news, and it was really making me crazy. So, I mean, really making me crazy. I'm not, I want to underline that and say that I'm living to tell about it, okay? But doing this trash pickup, the coolest thing about it is that instead of imagining what is going on out in the forest, I'm going out and witnessing that myself. I mean, I'm there. If Ivea goes out into the beach, she's there. She knows, like, nobody can tell something different is happening. That is what you see. And that's a very powerful way to engage in our world. And it's also helped me to really turn the volume down on the things that we're trying to take over my mind. That sounds too conspiracy, but you know what I mean. There's a lot of things that want your attention, and try to be with what is the most, like, what does Linda need to do today in her world most? And so this really helped me to focus on what I could do, and that what would make me feel stronger to be able to better serve the people that are in my life. So anyway.
That's beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Who wants in on this conversation? Hey, let's bring in Rebecca Rolnick. And let's see. Oops, I pushed the wrong button. I was trying to not make you disappear, Rebecca. I was trying to unmute you. There we go. There we are.
No.
So what Linda was talking about reminded me of something. I actually did a writing workshop Wednesday on this back for my birthday. I was inspired by Ivea's birthday trash pickup, so I also did one for my birthday. And what it really made me think about is this idea of doing actionable things that you can see the difference. And because even if those relatively small actions, that itself is not going to solve a systemic issue. That's not going to solve climate change and injustice and all of these things. But I think it's really important for our own mental health and well-being to be able to feel like we've done something, and that can keep us going, and to visibly and tangibly make a difference. In addition to things like donating money or advocating for a certain policy, or, like, there's so many things that we can do, even though they're small, but they're so important. And to be able to show students too that what they do does make a difference, and that when we're all working together, it adds up. And so this is really for me, I think, the key part, that there's this idea in our culture, not exactly sure where it comes from, but there's this idea that if you do something good, you're not supposed to tell anybody about it, because then you're bragging, and then it's like, oh, it's performative, you're only doing the good thing so that you can be seen as good. And but I think that's a problem, because there are so many people doing so many good things that are really having an impact. But when we feel like, oh, I shouldn't tell anybody because it's, you know, then I'm just doing it to make myself look good.
Yeah.
Then all these other people around us are going around thinking like, oh, everything is so hopeless, nothing good is happening.
Yeah.
But if we share the story, so the first thing is doing the stewardship, you know, doing some kind of action, but then sharing that story with other people and saying, hey, I did this and it made a difference and it helped. Then that can inspire other people by knowing that there are people doing good things, and that can inspire them to do things. And because I think the problem is that we all feel like we're so alone in this, and we're not. Especially, I mean, like here in the nature journal community, I think we all support each other, but in real life, you know, not everybody is into nature, not everybody is into environmentalism. So it can feel isolating to be someone who cares so deeply, like what you said, Jack, to feel these things, not just in a like morally or, you know, ethically or you know, in my mind, I know that this is right and this is wrong, but like you said, to feel it viscerally when things are not being protected. You know, I think it can be isolating to feel that strongly when that's not the norm within our culture. So yes, I agree that community is really important. Sharing the story, doing the actions, and then sharing that with each other and being inspired by all of the good things that people are doing.
Absolutely.
And learning from each other.
Yeah.
And that impact of the story then, you know, you go like, oh, it's empowering. It's empowering. That's the environmental prize, the Goldman Environmental Prize. There are these amazing stories of people in small communities doing powerful things against money and power for the sake of the planet. And you see, if you go to the Goldman Environmental Prize website, you can see these stories of people all around the world doing these sorts of things, and it really motivates you. Everybody get on their mailing list, because every once in a while they send you like, here's an interview with one of these people who's doing great things, and you're kind of like going like, oh, this is my species. You know, it is. But you, Rebecca, are a master storyteller, and we're really your point of it's doing the action is one thing, but then if you can take that story and share it, that is, I mean, storytelling is such a powerful way to teach. And also if you are you can't lead by example if nobody sees you. Silence telephone. Sorry, now where's that button? There. Sorry about that, everybody. And you're also kind of seeing that story connects us with it. We don't feel alone. The isolation is so disempowering. But when you hear the story, you kind of like, oh, that's beautiful. I could do that. I want to do that. Just like, I'm going to bring Evea in on this, because just, I think, you know, a great example of this is Evea deciding, all right, I'm going to, on my birthdays, I'm going to go do a trash cleanup. And then she doesn't just do that. She shared that with other people. Other people are now inspired by it. It's now a thing, right? You know, it's, oh, how'd you get a flower icon on there? Oh, I love that.
You can use any emoji now.
Oh, I did not know that. And so that then has motivated other people in the community to do this, and it's now sort of becoming part of the nature journaling identity, that, oh, it's my birthday, or it's my birthday of somebody that I love. In honor of them, I'm going to go do a trash cleanup.
I was going to say, to add to that, I relate a lot to what you were saying, Rebecca, about feeling self-conscious about talking about something that we do. because, you know, we don't want to look like we're bragging. So I will say that one thing that really helped was that the first time I did it, I was 16, but I didn't go out and do it by myself. I invited people to come with me from the very beginning. So that way it wasn't bragging, it was an invitation. It was an invitation, hey, come on, join me. And I was lucky, I got a small group of people who came together. And there's been some years I've gone alone, but a lot of years I've had people who come and join in. So that then that way it's like the whole thing about building community, it's a way of inviting people to be part of that story. And then also by doing that together, the more and more people join in, you might think, oh, it's a little thing and I can't solve everything in the system by picking up this trash, but you can model for people. And the more and more, like Jack was saying, that it becomes a community value, that will change the system.
It does.
If you have a community value. So then, like, now more of the Nature Journal Club does this, or maybe people are out and they see you happening to go by and, you're
That's
cleaning.
right.
And then the more and more people hear about it, then the more people it begins to get stuck in their heads, like a song you can't get rid of. And then they're thinking, oh, well, there's that trash over there. So that's another thing that's so good about repeating the story, is that the story can change the system by changing what the system values.
That's right.
So
That's right.
and also want to agree with Linda that, yeah, taking action it helps. The endorphins, like Billy Joe was saying in the chat, it makes you want to do it again, especially if you do it more than once. I do restoration on Fridays, and part of that is because I get a huge rush, not only from picking out the plants, but from knowing that, like, there's this little site and it's going to be a healthier place. And so if all you need is, like, just go outside and just do one little thing for a pick-me-up, and it will stick with you. And it's a great way of combating that feeling of hopelessness.
It does.
And
Go ahead.
I was going to say, also make sure that you nature journal that. When you nature journal the place before or during or after, then you keep that connection to the place. You keep falling in love with that place. And you're able to share that with other people. And especially because we're part of the story too. So you nature journal the nature itself, but then you also nature journal what you've done to change it. Whether it's that you scribble what the pieces of trash looked like, or you draw like if there's patch locations, like the trash is more concentrated here or here, why is that? Then you can even turn that into an I wonder, why is the trash collecting here and not here? And so then you can draw that, you can make a little map. So that can go into your nature journal as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So since we've been doing this, can you hear me? Yeah. Since we've been doing this, we've noticed a lot more people walking around our community with those plastic trash bags, just in case they see trash. So, and maybe they're always doing this, because sometimes after you buy a certain car, you start seeing it and it's always there. but I like to think we had an effect, but I don't in fact know, but I know that it's not so isolated as I thought before. So that was one thing. The other thing about, sharing it in your nature journal, and then I'm probably going to really need to connect with you, Rebecca, because some of the places that we went to were they were homeless camps that had been abandoned, and the stories that were in the litter were like, all of us had, like, after we got done with it, we were all like kind of like whacked sideways, because it's not just like taking care of the community, but you're aware of there's a whole part of the community that doesn't have the privilege to think about picking up trash. I mean, you think like, oh, picking up trash is such a low level thing, but no, you have to have a certain lifestyle to be able to do that even in your time. So that was like, and I'm still processing that right now. Anyway. But I do feel like the just what I said before, being out there and witnessing things is, you feel like you're part of a news source, that you are not only doing a good thing, but you were there, and it's like the very powerful aspect of the things that we've been doing with the nature journaling for a long, long time. I mean, I do feel like I just thank you. I just thank you for this community and to be able to share this particular thing. So
what you're saying there about the importance of bearing witness, and Avea was also saying, like, when you're out there doing this, sort of journal about it, and then you can also use that journaling to share the story.
Yeah.
So we can use our journals as a tool to kind of internalize this experience, we can also use the journals to communicate that experience and share it out with other people. So to bear witness and to give yourself a voice. If you don't feel comfortable kind of getting in front of a group and talking, you can share your journal page.
That's right. Yeah, thank you.
A lot of ways to do that.
Anyway.
Ivea, yes.
Another thing too is that by putting this in your journal, it can be really validating. I know a couple weeks ago I was talking about kids who might live in communities where it's not that clean, and them being able to write about that in their journals can be really validating for them, especially if you're reading it and you're witnessing their stories. And when it comes to kids, like a lot of them, if you just get them taking action early, a lot of them will integrate that as part of their motivation, and part of what, I don't know, I think that kids wind up being a lot more optimistic if they are taught from an early age to take action. So when it comes to all of these issues, and environmental issues and worrying about overwhelming the kids, you can break it down for them and maybe talk about different issues, but then not all at once, so that then they have time to really look into what the science is. And then, or you can if the kids are a bit older, you can let them brainstorm about all the things that might be worrying them, and then maybe choose one of those things and then brainstorm together all the actions that they can take together. Yeah. If you have the kind of setup that works, you can even make that like a year-long project that they can do. And that kind of thing can be really empowering for the kids to do that. And also, speaking of nature journaling, one thing that might help both you and kids is if you start to have activities based off of the climate change and all of that address emotional well-being and give people time to mourn things that they might have lost or express their fears, but then tie it back into action and things that we can do. Yeah, just some thoughts about with the kids. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivea. I'd like to bring Alina into the conversation as well. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yes, I've been missing you and everybody because I was teaching so much in the fall. And I'm at Rutgers University in New Jersey. And I taught a new nature journaling class for college students. The first one ever we taught, and in the fall. And we followed you and Marley's fantastic curricula and everything. And it was amazing. But we had students that come from any kind of background, any kind of major. That was open to anybody at the university, 25 students about. And I was thinking about some of the things that you've been saying, because we don't deal with kids, we deal with young adults, or people that are right at the edge of becoming free living human beings, or whatever you want to call them. And we saw so much growth in them, and some of the assignments we did were really take-home messages from them. And one of them I just wanted to tell you about because it has to do with this topic. I wanted to log in today to share some of these things. And we made a new assignment called Human Detritus. So human detritus is, these were students that were with remote class, so they were wherever they were in their homes, or one person was in China and other people were in various parts of the States and other places, and they log in. But they had to nature journal something that they produced as detritus, or that humans had produced during one day. So they either could go down to like a river and look what they found along the river, but most of them choose to look at all this garbage they produced during one day in their lives, and then they nature journal that on their page. So it could be their lunch and all the plastic packages from the lunch that they had to draw and calculate, and they had to use quantitative and qualitative stuff with this, and all the I wonder and I reminds me of, and all of that. And after they had done that, we talk about it in class afterwards, and after they had done that, it was amazing how it just was like a light bulb, how these students were like, this is me, this is what I do, this is what I produce. So when you make things like, it becomes real and it becomes actionable immediately, they can take action the next day. It's not, I think it's fantastic that you go out and clean up garbage. It's absolutely amazing. But if you can do these tiny little things every day, and not buy this, but buy that, that is incredibly powerful for these people that were sitting at home in isolation and, with the pandemic and everything. So I just wanted to share that because I thought it was such an amazing thing that we did in the class, that particular thing. And I'm happy to share it. Jack, I can send it to you if you want to share it.
Oh, please. Is there a way to put a link to it also into the chat?
I don't have it in the format right now.
If you send it to me, I will then, Aveda will help us put that into the page on the website where this recording will be shown. Okay. And people will be able to download it from there. That would be a wonderful thing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so that was great. And I wanted to thank Jack. I want to thank you for everything you do for all of us that are trying to teach, because we just go to your website and we get ideas and we get this and that and we steal from you, and then we say that it's from you, but then we kind of mail it into what we will work in our classes. It's amazing.
Yeah, everything that I do is all open source. Most of my ideas come from, modifications of ideas of other people. And so it just kind of keeps rolling along. So yeah. When you're doing that, you are doing exactly the same thing that I'm doing.
Well, yeah, and I do the same back because I actually run a whole website myself called Botany Depot that has botanical education tools that is also free to download and share from anybody.
You just did you see Avea's eyes light up there?
No.
Botany Depot?
Yes, botanydepot.com.
Please put the that also into the chat.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
This sounds
it's
like
already
a bunch of geeking out that we get to do on that. And so I also would like to bring in Aisha on this conversation. Hi.
Hi.
You're on the screen.
Oops. I'm excited about the Botany Depot too. I went up because I was just this morning putting together a botany class I'm going to be teaching to adults. So, which I was doing actually as my own therapy. I don't need to teach it till March. And the only thing I could think of that would cheer me up was working on that class. So love knowing there's another resource. I just was bouncing off everybody's ideas. What came to mind for me, and I started scribbling down, was thinking about in person. I know conversations are so complex now because some educators are teaching online and some in person. But thinking about in-person nature journaling, it made me think for teaching, I would maybe try and pick sites. I would add in another layer when trying to pick a location, that there was an interesting story to tell about actions being taken or in progress right now. Like I was just reading about the Western pond turtle releases happening locally this morning. That popped up in my newsfeed in Marin. And I was like, oh, if I went there, we could be journaling whatever, but maybe at some point I'd fit that in to share more stories of actions happening. The people, again, like you said, building community and giving them ideas, and either they want to participate in it, or it triggers another thought, or they give money, or if it's like someplace you take a group near where Linda is, you just mention here's a group that picks up trash once a week, or here, there's this other story going on, or maybe this is an organic garden we went to, so this person is consciously avoiding pesticides, and just opening that up. So if people want to dialogue with that, they don't have to journal about it, right? We're journaling with many different topics and themes, but that might be something I would bring into my location choice that I hadn't sort of thought about before hearing all of you speak.
Aveda, it looks like you wanted to bounce off of that. And I also want to tag into that too, but please.
Just really quickly about the location. First of all, yes, to like having stories about the location that have to do with stories of hope. And then another thing is sort of connecting to location as well, is an activity about watershed. Something that you can do with your students is to have them draw their watershed, and then to kind of consider where's the top of the watershed, where does it flow to, sources of pollution, carbon sources and carbon sinks, also methane, that kind of thing. Natural areas, how we can grow more, any endangered species. This is another thing that can really, I think, help gain a sense of place if you have them do this, because then they'll be more aware of the goings-ons of their communities. So just in terms of place-based activities about this topic.
I think it's really important that students realize that nature is all around you. You don't have to go to a special place, you know, that it's in the sidewalk, it's right outside your door and under your car in the driveway or wherever, you know, even in the garbage cans, you know, we had students that were, you know, nature journaling, squirreling, that were stealing food, and they were having their questions was that, are the squirrels fatter near the fast food markets or away from the fast food markets, you know? So
Nice.
They had this fat squirrel that was alone, but very good at stealing out of the garbage can. But it's just this idea that you don't have to go. It's great to experience these famous, amazing places, right? Or the beaches or something that is more natural than, you know, the inner cities, but you have to be, we have to be able to capture the people in the inner cities also, and let them understand that they can do something there and they can see things there. So.
And I also want to tag into what you're saying there, Aisha, that, you know, I've thought of, you know, the idea of, you know, when you're in a place, you know, here are environmental, you know, issues that relate to this place. But what you're saying is the thought behind that thought. You're not saying here are the environmental issues in the place. You're saying here are the people who are doing something about the environmental issues in the place. And
Yeah, exactly.
And so it takes it from like, guess what, there's a problem, to guess what, people are doing something. And so the more you're sort of regularly exposed to these examples of self-driven, empowered action, and also helping people, you know, it could either motivate somebody to do that themselves or to connect with those organizations into the things that they are doing. They're like, oh, that's something I want to get a part of. And it's building hope, it's building community. And, you know, we talk about these sort of things like, you know, I'm going to put my piece of trash in the trash can. These sort of, I'm going to recycle my bottle. But these things are not addressing the systems that are behind it. How can we address those systems? The way we do that is through an engaged community, an empowered, engaged community. And so your idea, Aisha, connects us to each other, creating community, an empowered community. And I think that is there. That's really, really rich.
Thank you. You made my point better than I did. Thank you, Jack. And I think that made me think then of like more examples of, say, you know, because we're trying to look at the bigger systems. If somebody in your group chooses out of everything else a grass, right, sidewalk grass or a meadow grass, that it's a moment to maybe share, like have almost some things in your pocket to share. Oh yeah, people are discovering how much carbon sequestration is done by perennial grasses, and there are these efforts happening in parts of the country, you know, and just connecting the big issue back down to the small moment, if you see what I'm saying, and you'll probably put it better than me.
But I think that's so important, connecting the big and the small and the personal and the community, you know, all that kind of scaling of things, and also the power of feeling that you have some control over, you know, hopelessness usually comes from that you don't have any control over anything. And if you have some control over some little actionable things that you do or things that you can take, you know, or share with others, that kind of, just that idea that you can do something. You know, many times people don't do anything because they don't know what to do. And that's kind of the hopelessness comes from the the lack of resources or the lack of ideas or the lack of guidance, right? So
Yeah, and I was realizing you could
Yeah.
just, bring it right back to observation too, which is the nature journaling. Like, why would it be grasses? What about grasses? Oh, let's look at the root system of this grass, or can we wonder how far it spreads or how down it spreads? Like, why is it? Because
Yeah.
everybody knows about trees, right? Because that makes it
Mhm.
into the public media. But in grasslands, it's grasses, the perennial grasses. So I'm just kind of going off on that particular.
Yeah, no, I all agree with you.
Or you're studying something rotting, like you mentioned, from your trash can, but then you can go into methane sources, or what is decomposition? What is decomposition? Why is it sometimes CH4 and why is it sometimes not? And the role of oxygen, and what can you look at in your own little patch right now to better journal or observe it while still understanding the big problem?
Yeah,
Or
I
why,
just wanted
why
to,
keeping
yeah.
your food out of the landfill actually makes a difference, Why
think
are they
then-
saying to do that?
Many times it's also about making the things that initially looks ugly or initially looks, unappealing, interesting, so there are, like weeds, for example. That's my research. I work on dandelions and other things, but the things that people take for granted, or the things that people don't see that are really important, or squirrels or pigeons or other things, so all these things are things that are not really nature to people, but they are nature in an inner city, and they are part of the whole system of the food web in the cities. And in grasslands, the same thing. We take the grass for granted, they're not. Yeah, I'm going to shut up now.
I'm sorry, I spoke over you. I didn't mean to do that. Please
No,
continue.
but and Catherine wants to talk, so I'm going to be quiet now.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I love all these ideas. I just wanted to maybe bring it back a little bit to working with young children, if anyone has experience with that. Because I've noticed there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear and maybe misinformation, maybe not. I mean, I've heard young kids, say, well, we're all gonna die in 10 years because of climate change. Or, my son actually said that. And, it was because my husband told him that was gonna happen. And so like, there's extreme fear in children. And as educators, I think that we can, address that, doing all of these things that we're talking about, paying attention. But I'm wondering if anyone has any advice about how to respond to that and say, well, no, we're not going to die in 10 years. I mean, or maybe we are, I don't know. But what do we say?
I think part of it comes down to breaking, that's sort of what I was thinking about with breaking down the issues, is if you just simply say, oh, climate change, that's so big and all encompassing. And it's also kind of nebulous when you think about it, because, then you think, oh, what exactly does that even mean? So if you start to break it down into its pieces, then you can sort of, sorry, you can also sort of break it down into what's causing it, into feedback loops, positive feedback loops and negative feedback loops. And I think when you can break it down like that, then it becomes a lot easier to say, oh, how can I disrupt this feedback loop here? So for example, if we're talking about, the ice caps are melting, and then there's increased water that goes into the atmosphere, and then that holds onto the heat, and then, you get the idea, and then that kind of cycles and keeps holding onto the heat, and then it increases the effect. Then you think, okay, so then what can we do exactly about the increasing water? Or then you find out that maybe it's not so cut and dry, that maybe there's a feedback loop that also goes that the increased water vapor means that there's more clouds, and that certain clouds have a higher albedo effect, so that then actually it works in the other way around, and it kind of cools things. So seeing that there's a lot of different things going on, and that it's a lot more complicated and not so cut and dry, I think that actually, instead of it being more distressing, I think it can wind up being more encouraging, because then you see that there's a lot of different solutions that you can have. Because it's not just one issue, it's a whole bunch of intertied ones, which means you have a bunch of intertied solutions to kind of work on that.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think there's so much generalizing about it. And I just remember seeing all these drawings my students were doing of the planet Earth crying, or the planet Earth being sad. And Yeah, I get that, but it is like really important to teach them that it's more complex than that.
Yes.
For the youngsters, and I don't think this is just a problem with the youngsters, but with dealing with climate change in general, because the problem, so we're adapted to respond to threats that are immediate, that are observable, and where my action, or sort of the consequences of my action are clear. One of the reasons why it's difficult for us to get kind of the ball rolling on responding to climate change is because the responsibility is diffuse. The impact is years out. We're seeing things, of course, right now, but the things where we're kind of sort of seeing that trajectory, that's years out. And that's not happening right now. And right now, I still have bread on my table. So the solutions to dealing with it, it's not like putting this piece of trash into the garbage can. We're dealing with systems. And if I'm in 3rd grade, that's a lot to wrap my head around. And that's one reason that I really like I think this is maybe the trajectory being to start off helping people to care about nature. And we do that by paying attention. Journaling is a wonderful way of doing that. They're asking questions, exploring mysteries. So we want to get ourselves to care about nature. We do that, again, by the act of paying attention. So first task, pay attention in nature journal. That helps us fall in love with nature. And then the idea that we can do things that make a difference, that idea itself is revolutionary and is hard to get across and will only come apart sort of kind of ingrained in us through experience. So volunteering opportunities for our kids, or the trash pickup. You know, you can do this and see this result. Also, the idea of connecting with other people, that we are stronger together. Look at how much our class picked up when we came down here and did this. We did this together and we made a difference. And then we don't want it to kind of get back to being dirty. What should we do next? What else can we do? Oh, we can make some signs and we can put them up on the bulletin boards in the park. You know, please don't trash my park. And is this addressing climate change? No, it's not. But it's addressing the ideas of community action, of empowered action, and that we can make a difference. So I wonder if sort of at the lower grades, I think what I would probably emphasize, and I know that with my daughters, when we have gone out, because of you, Ivea, when we go out on birthdays in our family to do trash pickups, they feel so good about it. They put on their adventure boots, they get their gloves, and they stand there next to their pile of their bag of trash at the end, and they look at it and they're like, wow, this is really cool. And they tell their teachers about it and they tell their friends about it. They're then storytelling about it. That is really, really powerful. And I think that that's essential to creating a public that is going to care about nature and have the ideas of kind of collective action to engage and deal with that. And that's why on Saturday, the Adventure Girls and I will be there with you at the beach. Billy Joe, what you got?
Yeah, similar to what everyone else was saying, especially with the young kids, they hear a lot of it, right? Everyone's talking about it, and so I always find that they tend to focus on all the negative things that can be, similar to what I think it was Catherine that was saying, and really thinking, and I always say to them, it's really easy to focus on the negative things. It's harder to focus on happy things. It's more energy that you have to put into that, and so I did like a little bit of a couple mindfulness, nature journaling based activities today as students are sort of welcomed back to online here in Ontario. And, I said to them, like, what are you feeling right now? Like, I just want you to sort of write that down. You can use emojis, whatever it is. And then I want you to go find a window, or if you can step outside, and I want you to sort of do that. What does it feel like? What are you thinking? And one of the young girls came back and she's like, well, it just makes me feel sad when I look outside because it's dull and gray and it looks unhappy. And I was like, okay. And I said, well, it's a winter here. And so I said, well, what happens if you looked at changing your perspective? And she was like, what do you mean? And I said, well, when we think about Canada, it has 4 seasons, and that 4th season, that winter season is a time for rest. It's a time for sleeping. So I said, are you looking at dead plants, or are you looking at sleeping plants? And she was like, oh, and I really thought about it that way. And I was like, have you ever looked at a black and white photograph before? And she's like, yes. And I said, well, aren't they beautiful? And she said, well, yes. And I said, so it's not really dull outside. I said, it's the shades that are becoming different. And I said, the lights and the darks and those highlights and undertones are really what's sort of speaking to us at this point. I said, it's snowing. I said, you can watch, the dancing snowflakes. I said, it's really perspective. And I said, my challenge for you, I said, is to really look at winter with different eyes, right? And so, yeah, so like that reframing to sort of think about it in a different way. But I really do think that, and this is where the nature journaling piece, I think for me really comes into play, is not only just their connection to nature, but their connection with themselves and their own feelings as well. And so really pushing for that mental health piece in terms of like, what does it feel like to be here right now? And what does it feel like if I went on a hike, right? Or a walk around the neighborhood and things like that. And I always say to the kids the same thing, nature is everywhere. Someone sort of said something to me on Twitter, well, that's just not in my students' reality. They can't go outside because of different circumstances. And I said, well, nature is everywhere, right? It's out a window. You can open a window, you can open a door. It's a house plant, it's a pet, it's the other humans in your house. I said, it's everywhere that you are. So I said, it's a reframing. It's a different perspective. It's very easy to become situated in a negative place, but if we can turn that into something positive. So even if I'm in a lesson and we're talking about the negative impacts of climate change, similar to Yavea, like, don't think about it on such a massive scale. Like, what do we notice locally that's different than maybe when, Miss Reed was a kid compared to what we're noticing now? And then following up with, what are we doing to fix that, right? Like, where is the positive part of that? Because yes, it's negative that it's happening, but what are we seeing? Who are we seeing as the pioneers that are sort of making that forefront? What can we do on a small scale that can assist in that, right? So there's a couple of programs that I run about, like, what did your lunch cost nature, and looking at, our lunch and how it comes globally, or our clothing and how it comes all from all over the place, and really getting kids to go like, oh, I didn't know that, right? And it's not to make them feel bad about the product that they've chosen, but that education is power, and that you can sort of relook at it in a different way and think like, oh, well, maybe I'm going to choose to grow my cucumbers this year instead of getting them from here, or vice versa. So small things for little kids, and things that they can actually are attainable actions for them to do in their own space without thinking, I'm just a little kid, how am I going to do that? You can grow a plant. You can grow a plant indoors if you live in an apartment building, right? So there's all these different things. And for little kids, I find small, attainable, and always really focusing on positive things that are changing. There's so much negativity in the world that whatever I can do to help make that as a positive and joyful experience as possible, then hopefully that joyfulness becomes an infection of good that sort of spreads through it.
That There's so much richness in this. We're loving this conversation. I noticed that we've come up against the end of the hour. What I would like to do is to give Rebecca, Aisha, and then Robin an opportunity to share some more thoughts. Are people okay with extending this perhaps 10, 15 more minutes? I'm seeing a number of heads. If you have to bounce, we totally understand. But just know that there are we've got in the lineup here some really interesting thinkers who will also be bouncing off what Billy Joe just said there. That was again really useful. The idea of those things that the small thing where you can see something and make a difference. That ties into, you know, when we talk about climate change as something that's kind of going out there that other people away from us are responsible for, that will happen at some time in the future. That's a great way to make human psychology go, I don't care. So Billy Joe's strategies really directly address that. Thank you. Rebecca, we're going to start with you, then we're going to bounce to Aisha, and then Robin.
Hi, again, thank you. Two quick things. First, to bounce off Billy Joe, this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately too. Is, you know, some people say nature's everywhere, and some people are like, well, that's not really true. And so I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that not everybody has the same access to nature, and not everybody has the same opportunities. You know, like, I don't live in a city, so it's not really fair for me to say somebody in a city like, oh, well, yeah, you can have, there's nature there too, when I don't really have that experience. But just like Billy Joe is saying, I think that change in perspective is so important, so that when you do nature journaling and you do nature awareness, then you know that whatever place you have, you know, whatever opportunities you do have, even if they're more limited, you can fully appreciate them and take full advantage of what you do have. Because I think even if you're in a really rich place, there's always more that, and I mean rich ecologically, there's always more that there's always more to notice, you know, no matter where you are. Second, this has been mentioned, but I want to underscore this point about having the connection to nature, you know, before you learn about all of the issues and problems, and not just nature in general, but having a connection to a specific place and the place that you live, and that this place in nature feels like home to you, that you consider that place as part of your home and part of your community. And because one of the things that I see as a problem with a lot of environmentalism is that it can be kind of abstract, like, you know, recycle and climate change and save the rainforest and save the polar bears, and things that are not really tied to your own tangible experience. So, and this is something that we talked about in the restoration class, is, you know, first thinking of, start out the class thinking, you know, what are the gifts from nature that we receive, and, you know, how are we a part of nature? And then at the end of the class, we did what can we give back to nature in return? But instead of just starting out there, you know, instead of coming in from scratch and saying, what are the problems? What solutions can we problem solve and brainstorm? And what actions can we take starting from nothing? What's the difference when you have that conversation after you've been really observing and really grounded in a specific place, and you know the other species that are there, and you know what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, and you're coming at it from that perspective of a feeling of belonging and feeling a connection and love for this specific place where you live, and then thinking and having that as a basis for then what actions can we take?
So you're saying lead with belonging, connection, and love, and then that inspires action.
Yes.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I need to write that down in my notebook too. Aisha, we're going to bounce up to you. Rebecca, thank you for that. To sort of knit your thoughts into this fabric we're weaving. Oh, hold on a second. Sorry about that. Kaboom.
Thank you. Since I always forgot every time to unmute anyway, this is kind of handy that it's your fault, not mine.
I know. it's
The one other point that came to mind, bouncing off Billy Joe and Catherine, and really what Jack said at the beginning of that was going to be kind of part 2 of this discussion, is like, what can we do as educators in a group if students sort of bring up their despair and anxiety, and how to proceed. And that's kind of why I had definitely wanted to have this, participate in this. What came to mind for me during all this was a couple of activities Joanna Macy did with us a few times, once in Oakland and then once in Spirit Rock. And I've kind of always had those in my back pocket. And I think this conversation makes me think, yeah, maybe that's what I would pull out. I was thinking of this sort of middle school onwards, but it would kind of work with younger too, I think. Was just like, I personally would like to create space for, no, I don't know her personally. I just went to workshops she was leading. She did they were doing the whole climate, a big one on climate a few years ago at Spirit Rock, which is a meditation center near me in California. So lost my thought, Rebecca. Oh, so what I had been thinking is, like, to me, it's important to create space for the conversation instead of immediately trying to push everybody to move on to hope and action. And that's because of experiences I had at my job where it was basically a toxically positive situation. And even as I'm grieving a personal loss right now in my family, it's been very helpful to talk to the people who don't tell me to feel better, but just tell me, yeah, this is hard. We hear you. We find it hard too, And so I want to bring a bit of that, probably, if that comes up, without letting everybody get stuck in the morass. So what Joanna Macy did is an activity. There were 3 parts, and I can only remember 2, but you'll get the concept. Was 1, everybody got to share or do a turn and talk because of a limited time of like, and she gave us the starting opener, which was, I am sad that, or it grieves me that. And we got to get it out with each other and wept huge tears at the beginning of this conference. But then she had us turn and talk, and we both had a time to say, I hope that. And I feel like one of the third ones was something like, the strengths that I can bring to this are. Which was so great, right? Because then I thought about my community, my personality, my family, anything I needed to think about. So it's just like, I grieve, or I'm sad because, I hope that, and the strengths I bring to this, or the resources, we can reframe it in ways that work for each of us. And I found that a really helpful activity to keep the dialogue sort of moving without banishing any part of it to a deep, dark corner. So I just wanted to share that as my final thought of the day on this topic. Thank you. So thank you, Joanna Macy.
That was really, really rich. So you started with, I grieve that, and then turn and talk with other people, followed with that with, I hope that, and then the strengths that I can bring to this are.
Yep. And the turn and talk involved no interruptions. The other person could only, the expectation was set up that they would just nod and listen. They'd just be listening, not going, me too, or interrupting. It was your turn. and you got a full 2 minutes or whatever, you know, there's always the limits on time, but whatever, you got the full bit, and then they got their full time. Yeah, really powerful stuff,
Yeah.
right? Really powerful.
Hey, folks, aren't you glad you stuck around the last 15 minutes here? I am. Aisha, that was really rich. I'd like to bring on Robin Carlson for your thoughts, or to tie into thoughts that you've heard expressed here. Thank you for being with us. Robin Carlson, by the way, is an amazing nature journaler and writer who's done all this work sort of looking at recovery of natural systems from fire. It's really good to have you with us.
Thanks. And I have sure been appreciating all of the insights that people have had so far. It's been really beautiful. I wanted to also respond to some of the wonderful things that Billy Joe said about changing perspective. Because it really, that I find is the key both for myself personally and when I'm teaching others about nature journaling and climate change and just being in nature. And I just want to talk just a little bit more specifically how I approach that. And I want to actually go to the specific image of plants in winter, actually, because I think it's a really powerful understanding once you realize that even though the plant can be entirely dead, the part that we see above ground, I mean, everything we see looks completely dead. There's nothing, no living tissue there. The plant is fully alive underground, and that's completely not transparent to us at all. And it's a really nice parallel also to after wildfire, where the plant can be completely burned above ground and fully alive underground. And so what I think it was such an important turning point for myself, and that I try to share with people in a bunch of different contexts, but this is just a really, really good, clear one, is from the plant's perspective, put yourself in the plant's shoes. And is that plant suffering in any way? I mean, of course, we don't know the real answer to that, but once you start to think about things from the plant's perspective, life has continued. The most important parts of the plant are happy and safe underground and growing. What we see above ground was expendable, wasn't necessarily meant to exist in the beautiful form that we think is most important and is, you know, obvious to us as the sign of beauty and health. That's not what the plant thinks is beauty and health. And I think that taking that and extending that to anything else that we're observing too, trying to put ourselves in the position of whatever living thing that we're looking at, can make an enormous difference in how we see what's happening around us. And that is really important on the small scale of those, you know, that particular place in the world where you are right then making those observations, but it can make a really big difference in how you see the larger patterns of what's happening in the world as well, because it is easy to fixate on the bad things that are, you know, happening as a result of climate change and the things that we're losing. And while nothing should diminish that, nothing should take away from that sadness, it's also really important to see all of the ways that life is responding. And in any given changing climate, there are lots of losers, but there are also lots of winners in that climate as well. And they may not be the ones that we personally or we as a society want to see coming in and taking over, but I think it's really important to recognize the beauty in that too. I mean, even if it's becoming less biodiverse, and there's a lot of reasons that that's a very sad thing, there are still living things adapting and making the best of that situation, and being able to be open to that and at least see the beauty from the perspective of those species, I think makes an enormous difference. I mean, again, it's not to be saying that that makes up for everything and that we should not have the sadness too, but I think it's a really good way to still have balance while still letting ourselves grieve what we're losing, because not everybody, not everything sees it as a loss, and it's important to recognize that too.
That is beautiful. What an incredible way of tying into that those ideas of of perspective. Billy Joe, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I just was like, yes, this is exactly like what I was thinking, right? Like just it actually made me start thinking, about even more because when you're talking about the plant and sort of it letting go of the pieces that are unneeded that are above the ground and the pieces being under the snow and warm and being taken care of, then we have to flip that perspective again and have to say, are the pieces that are being let go of by the plants still needed by others, right? And so again, we flip that perspective and we think like, we're going to deadhead all of our flowers. We got to get rid of that. It doesn't look nice. But in the winter, especially if you're in a place with winter, that is impeccable birding right there in your backyard is to have that, right? And people picking up the leaves and the leaves falling off the trees in autumn, which is one of my favorite things to watch and to see the beautiful colors. And then people think, oh, it's yucky, we got to get it off our grass. But that's home. That is home to everyone in the winter time, right? And so being able to again change that perspective of what's ugly and what looks nice and what should we be doing, and sort of again flipping that perspective and looking at it from something else's perspective, not just somebody's perspective, but some things, right? Like it could be an insect, it could be a frog, it could be a salamander, all these different things. And then I think that really feeds into that connection, but that everything is connected together. And everyone thinks I've taught too about wildfires, and everyone says they're terrible. All the kids will say, well, fire's bad, and I'll be like, really? What about this and this? And they're like, oh, and they don't know that fire is actually the rebirth of so much. And even here in Ontario, like, we have to have wildfires in the north in order to regrow the forest up there. So again, just thinking about different ways to reframe the negativity into something that's positive and a connection, I just think was really beautiful the way that you sort of, brought that all together. That was just amazing. I loved it.
Let's thank you so much, Billy Joe. Let's join Aisha one more time to kind of round out our discussion here, and any last thoughts that you wanted to share. This has been such a rich and beautiful discussion. Aisha.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to go back to what Robin also said in terms of the bigger thing of beyond winter, of actually climate change and losing species, and new species are going to be coming in. And that's something we're all trying to face, especially those of us who are super observant and super aware of these patterns. So thank you, Robin. And it was helpful to hear you say that out loud, because what I want to say is I have felt that my nature journaling and scientific self is perhaps the only thing that is going to get me through this, is to just observe what's coming in instead and who's surviving as we grieve the loss of other things, and that I'm going to have to bring that part of my brain and self to it, and that nature journaling may become my tool in more ways than I imagined. Like right now, I'm recording what I have and what works and what I love. And at some point, I will be recording changes and trying to find a new way to wrap my head around it. And it's kind of why I've been diving, for those of you who have been knowing me talk for a while, I'm sort of changing work situations, but I'm diving deeper into teaching nature journaling and botany, because observing it without completely panicking about it is going to have to be, I think, one of the things we're all going to just have to do. Plants will be here no matter what, just different plants. So can we track them and track who comes along with them? And I guess that's where my thinking has been going, with where I'm going to go with nature journaling, including whatever community I end up interacting with about it. So thank you, Robin. And of course, everybody else.
Ivea, give us one last sort of thought about this project that you've started here.
This was inspired by a panel that Marley did with Robin and 3 other people who are recording the climate changes they see. This is going to be the Climate Change Stories Traveling Journal. And so anybody who wants to explore what you've seen locally in climate change, whether that's your scientific observations or your feelings or whatever else, this will be going out. And so people are invited to request it so that they can add their entries to it and then pass it on to somebody else. Also with this idea that it will be a story that the entire community adds to, so that we might be able to take hope from each other's stories. Also encouraged is writing your stories of hope in here too, any stewardship that you've done. So just want to encourage people to keep a lookout for this.
That's a wonderful project, that journal that bounces around. And thank you, everyone in this community, for your thoughts and ideas on this topic today. I've got, let's see how many pages. I have 3 pages of notes to just to roll through and to play with. And I'm going to really enjoy sort of kind of contemplating these ideas and trying to stitch them into the way I think about things. I think that the topic which we have started here deserves a more extended conversation. I would love to revisit this at another time. I think one sort of an interesting angle of this is we didn't really kind of get around to how can we deal with discussing ideas that have become a political hot potato, and what happens and sort of what is going on with human psychology when any idea becomes politicized, and sort of the relationship between identity and ideas. And I think that framing things in that way helps us understand, be compassionate, and actually have more productive conversations. But we also have touched on aspects of thinking about this the trajectory of our planet here that has is really deep and powerful. Aisha, would you be interested in working with me to actually make a to try your see if we could, in a Zoom format with our community here, on a different call, sort of walk through the I grieve that, I hope that, and the strengths that I can bring to this, our process in maybe some small group discussions in our community.
Absolutely. I saw that Sarah suggested that. Yeah, absolutely.
I did too. I thought I'm going to steal that idea.
Yeah.
Would you?
Of course.
Would just please just get in touch with me after this meeting, and we will follow up that with we'll talk offline, and we'll set that up for this community.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank all of you so much. There have been some beautiful ideas dropped into the chat as well. If people want to save the chat, you can do that now. If you go to the chat, there's a small ellipsis in the bottom right-hand corner. If you go to that and hit the thing that says save chat, it'll be saved to your desktop. So you may want to do that. My friends, thank you so much. Also, want to give my appreciation to my co-hosts, Avea Moore and Billy Joe. thank you all, and be well, be safe. Let's love on this planet and take care of it. Let's take care of each other. Thank you all. I'm going to encourage everybody to just bounce over for a moment to if you go to the bottom, the button in the top right-hand corner where it says view, and bring that over to gallery, then you can see everybody's faces, and then you can wave at everybody. Otherwise, you just see the people who are on the spotlight screen. But look at all those people in there. Oh, hey, you guys. Thank you so much for being here. And we will see you soon.